Hello, everybody. What is up?
Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
We're just going to jump straight in.
Woo.
Welcome to the podcast. Another week. Simon, how are you?
Another week. I am very cold. You might hear in this episode that we both have a little crookiness in our voice. It's the middle of winter in Australia. It's a miserable, rainy day outside. You can't see with the curtains, but it's cold and humid. And kids, we were lamenting about having kids in winter, and they always bring some sickness from school, and then you just go in circle of like constantly being sick at home.
You just can't avoid it. Like, kids just do not understand not spreading snot and saliva all over each other's faces. They just haven't learned that yet. And so it's just impossible to not catch some kind of sickness throughout winter. We actually had a not great one this weekend. We were away with a bunch of our kids' friends and their parents. It was a really lovely weekend away. We went to the beach, even though it was freezing cold and raining, but it was very nice.
I was going to say.
And while we were there, the first night we were there, our youngest, who's about 2 years old, vomited during the night. And that's always like is it one vomit, or is it an isolated thing? Is it like a cold, or like is it due to him being just regularly sick, or is it this thing called gastro? Or I'm sure there's a non-Australian name for this, but basically like a stomach flu that goes through the whole house, and that is unstoppable. Like, everyone in the house is just vomiting and everything else that comes along with that. You don't have much control over your stomach. And so we were like, oh no, we're in this house, like in close quarters with like all of these other families, and we're going to spread it around. We're all just going to be like locked down to this house, all, taking turns with the toilet. But then it didn't happen again. And I think maybe he maybe has like an insensitivity to strawberries. Sometimes when he has a bunch of strawberries, he just like, vomits, or it really upsets his stomach. And then other times he's fine. So it seemed fine. We were like, awesome. Okay. No one else got sick the whole time, which was really good. And then, of course, on the drive home, while trying to get back to, from an exhausted weekend where everyone just needs to rest, he threw up in the car, and then we had to take everything out of the car and like clean everything and like change him and try and get
down the creases of the baby seat and in the
it's deep in the baby seat.
I've been there so many times.
Drive the rest of the way home with that like stench of vomit. But yes, he seems fine now, but it was a bit of a stressful time.
Oh man. My kids are a bit older, but I've been through so many experiences just like this. Maybe that's the vomit episode, but I remember going to the snowy mountains from New South Wales, Sydney, where we used to live. There's at some point, as mountains tend to do, you go to windy up and down roads, and we were like literally, I don't know exactly how far from the ski, but we were going on a ski trip, and that was the last stretch. We had refueled petrol, and we were like, okay, let's put the gear on the kids so that like we get out the car and we go straight skiing. Of course, like with like 7 layers of jackets and gloves and stuff.
It's not a good time for...
Yeah, this is when my daughter decided to be road sick and do the classic like vomit over every single possible
it's amazing how far it can spray. Again, like when you're a kid and you just don't understand, like, vomit into a bucket, like put it into a container, keep it contained. No, just spray it looking up in the
air. When you said finish the drive with the stench in the back, that's exactly, I remember like finishing this. It's about 7 hours from Sydney, and the last 20-30 minutes were like, and of course we didn't go skiing. We parked on the parking and we watched everyone go skiing while we changed all the layers, and we're like, okay, now we don't have ski gear, how can we ski? At the price of the ski trip in Australia, and you're having a wonderful time.
Yeah, that sounds like a stressful trip. At least it wasn't after you purchased everything and then realized you couldn't go. So like you'd purchased a lift ticket for the ludicrous amount of hundreds of dollars that it is for a lift pass for the day, and hiring gear.
Yeah, we had to still rent stuff. We ended up putting her, shout out to Perisher in the snowy mountains, which happens to have a daycare on the mountain. The tourism industry is very well polished down there, so that you can arrive with nothing, like in jeans and normal shoes, and you're like, you literally, like, when you do the airport check where they make you spread your arms and legs for the X-ray, you go like this and they measure you, give you jacket, pants, stuff. Do you need childcare? Do you need lesson for the, like, you, if you have money, you tick all the boxes and it's all taken care.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is very convenient. Is that not a thing in the rest of the world? Do they, like, I guess smaller mountains just wouldn't have the facilities to have things like childcare and kids lessons and stuff, right?
Yeah, so Perisher is the equivalent. If you were in Switzerland, that would be Zermatt or Crans-Montana, like the big fancy resorts. I grew up in a proximity of 3 or 4 really small low-key resorts, so there would be one ski shop somewhere in the village, and everyone rocks up with stuff because they know, like, you gotta organize it beforehand because it's a small low-key resort, but tourists would show up and then line up in this one sports shop, which has, like, not particularly enthusiastic and hospitality trained staff, which are pretty grumpy, and it takes forever to rent, and they don't have much choice. And yeah, I discovering how it works in Australia, and also in Park City, like a couple of months ago in Utah. Just you go and you can choose 6 models, and they have this demo board, and it's all super. It takes 3 minutes to get all your gear. Yeah, my experience renting stuff in Switzerland is way more. It's also 10 years in the past, so you might have you might have caught up. But I've always thought, like, when I discovered the proper way of doing it, I was like, oh, we are so behind in terms of, like, providing an experience and like happy, quick service. It's just like, yeah, stand there and they ignore you for like 45 minutes, and you're like, you can see people who drove from Geneva airport and they're like, I want to go ski, just give me something and I'll pay whatever.
But that's the thing, they're not turning around and being like, I'm flying back out of here, so they don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
There's no reason to increase the customer service.
Yeah. So, my friend, we have promised our very large audience of 7, which is my mom, your partner.
Yeah, Caro, when she gets around to editing our podcast,
she has to watch it.
She's one of our active listeners.
The view count goes. But we have promised for like 3 or 4 weeks now to kind of talk about what we want to do, have like some sort of a little adult-like plan with the podcast. In terms of, like, what sort of, if we want to have different topics, or maybe bring some guests along, and maybe think about the format a little bit more consistent. Although we both agree it's kind of cool to be like YOLO, free-handing it, and kind of like, if it's a bit longer or a bit shorter or a bit unstructured, this is good as well. So, do you have any specific topics you would like to bring up? We're going to do this finally this week.
Yeah, goal number 1. Actually release the podcast. This is something that I have not been doing well. I think we have like
the what? We have a podcast?
we have an audio version of this? Seriously? You wouldn't know it if you were subscribing to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of the other podcast platforms, because I have been doing a terrible job of actually uploading them after we finish recording. When we finish recording, I'm always like, all right, what do I need to do this week? And just work takes over, and my whole week disappears. And so, yes, we are going to get better at actually releasing these right after we record the video. Quickly get it out on in audio form, and also do a nicer version for YouTube, I reckon, chopping off the start and end, and maybe stacking us, or maybe putting it out on Twitter or something like that. Anyway, being more professional about how we actually package it up and put it out, rather than just doing this live thing that gets 30 views after we're finished, and then being like, all right, cool, we recorded another podcast. Need to get better.
So that ties in perfectly in one thing I wanted to touch on, and you feel free to push back if you don't think it's good, but I kind of want to try to have the episodes a bit shorter intentionally. And right now we kind of talk, and when it reaches 1 hour, it's like, we should just maybe cut it off. And then we go into the sick pics for another half an hour. And so I was like, I love the idea of aiming for, like, have 30 minutes as like a sort of like guideline. And when you reach 30 minutes, you consider wrapping up with like a little sick pic, so it ends up anywhere between 30 minutes and 3 hours. But what you just said is something that was going through my mind. If we have little shorter recordings and we try to start as closely as the whatever time we choose, we can use that like extra gain free time after the recording to quickly like I always want to do this like short like this moment was really cool, I want to do a little clip, and then if you don't do it after, you kind of forget about the episode. But if we record and right after it's taken 45 minutes, I'm like, I've blocked an hour and a bit for this recording. I'm like, I can very quickly now in Notion or anywhere just make notes. These things we said we should do a clip, and kind of just do some like pre-planning of how to make like extra content, or like write the description of the episode and put it on the website or as a draft or whatever. Like do that sort of prep work. You can even maybe edit the like just do some of this admin stuff we have to do because it's just us. I mean, your wife is helping us, but it's not like we have a team of dedicated assistants doing lots of stuff. So
she's not helping enough. Otherwise, we would be actually releasing the episodes.
Yeah, but I thought shorter episode means more easy to consume for the audience, and then we can reclaim some of the time that we can invest in doing this sort of like adult professional management.
And usually I'm cutting you off from talking and talking and talking at about 60 minutes. So I'm happy to cut you off from talking and talking at about 30 minutes if you'd
Speaking of. No, yeah.
But yeah, so this sounds like a very good idea. And I feel like just generally like a 30-minute podcast is probably much more consumable than an hour, or most of our podcasts, like you're saying, we start thinking about wrapping it up at an hour. Maybe we should start thinking about wrapping it up at like 20 minutes and jump into sig picks so that the whole thing is like 30 minutes, because I think at the moment it's
probably an hour plus,
closer to an hour and a half for each of the episodes.
I don't want it to be too rigid and stuff. Like one podcast I've started listening to I really, really enjoy is Matt Stauffer from the Laravel ecosystem. It's called The Business of Laravel, and he talks about people who built real businesses using Laravel and how they went about it. So Aaron Francis was on there, and also his podcast partner, Ian Lansman. And the whole discussion, you can see Matt like being cognizant of the time. He's like, I want to ask these two questions. I realize we have 10 minutes left, and it is like, you can tell there's a timer going on the side, and they're trying to always stick to half an hour to 40 minutes. And I do like the fact that it's going to be a condensed episode, and you can, like, around your lifestyle, if you have a drive that is 20 minutes and then you listen at 1x, 1.5x, or 2, like it's going to be exactly this time and you can consume that thing. It's kind of nice to have a predictable, without being completely Swiss precision about it, time slot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Why aren't you the one keeping track of the time? Come on.
Why do you think I am an expat? I had to flee this like overly organized and serious and you need to do the right thing and stay in your lane stuff. To spread my wings and be able to be free, I needed to go to Australia, which is much more laid back.
The laziest country where time doesn't really matter.
The laziest country is Greece. My dad's Greek, and in Greece they have a common saying which means let's do it tomorrow. Like whatever you ask is avrio. Avrio means tomorrow. If you go to Greece, like within 1 or 2 days, you'll ask a question, someone will say avrio, and it means tomorrow. And it basically is like
later, another time.
It doesn't mean tomorrow. It means not now.
Yeah, it's the Greek version of we'll circle back to this next sprint.
Yes, let's take it offline.
Yeah, let's take it off. All of those. Yeah,
let's fix it.
But yes, like you were saying, one time when you do need to be very cautious of time or aware of time is when you have guests, which is another thing that we want to get into. So we've been talking about this since the start. We have had one guest on the Next.js episode.
Yeah, Luke Bennett, friend of ThinkMill and friend, period, a good friend of mine. So shout out to Luke, because the idea of having these guests happened 15 minutes before the actual live recording. And there was Next.js Conf that happened, and just before we went live, you and I could see in our team Slack, we have a very vibrant Slack channel at ThinkMill, and Luke was doing this recap of the Next.js conf because he obviously got up early or stayed up late to catch up with it. And I was like, I just poked, hey, he's never been on a live podcast or anything at that point. How do you feel about going live with your camera on full screen on YouTube to give us a recap of stuff? And shout out, he was like, okay, I'll do it. Yeah, I can. I think I can do it. And he jumped in and gave us a really cool recap. And yeah, that was awesome. And he's the only guest at this point for the whole.
Actually, we had one more special
yes, for
surprise
8 minutes.
short guest.
That wasn't a guest. It was a replacement for you who didn't show up.
And who was it?
Ken Dodds blessed us with 8 minutes in his Tesla while waiting for his kids to finish a music lesson. So that was the week, literally not a week, like 2 or 3 days after Epic WebConf. I planned to tell Jon about the whole conference and you couldn't be present. And I was like, oh, let's do next week. And then I was like, no, it just happened. So there's like this breaking news, whatever, / I am super enthusiastic and I have my sunburn from the skiing and all the stuff. And so I thought, I'll go YOLO, and I went YOLO, and in the background I just said to Kent, hey, I'm doing this, like if you know any of the speakers, whatever. No, I didn't say to Kent, I sent to the whole speaker lineup and even the conference Discord, all the attendees, if anyone wants to jump in and share the recap with me. And then while I was presenting, after 45 minutes of talking by myself, I hear that little interview ring because I had shared the link. And I pick up and it's Ken Dodds sitting in his car and he was like, I've got 8 minutes. And so we went straight into like, here, the floor is yours, whatever you want to say. And yeah, that was cool.
That's awesome. And just in case you're wondering how much Simon actually saw this as a replacement for me, in the audio file of that episode, like we upload the audio and video
to
a Google
Jon?
Drive, so I can edit it. Yeah, usually it's Jon and Simon, and this one was Simon and Kent C. Myers. So he
Kent C. Myers.
he really was
this. Yes,
trying to replace me.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of people we want to get on. Salma White Panther would be awesome to get on. Anthony Campolo, Aaron Francis would be an awesome person to get on. There's heaps.
Yeah, we have a sneaky list that keeps growing of people that we on Twitter or in person kind of planted the seed and like, oh, I'd love to come. So we kind of want to start doing this. And yes, like you said, this kind of is if you bring other people in, you kind of have to be a bit more intentional about the start time and how long they should block. So we start at 9:30, but sometimes it's 10, 10:15 because we just hang out and then so block 3 hours and you should be good. Like we don't want to do that. Yeah. So yeah, start at I think aiming for 30 minutes, and if it goes to 40, it's fine. If we feel 43 already, maybe we say, hey, we're not gonna do sick picks this week because that's a can of worms for another 15 minutes easily because we get so excited.
Simon's just really hoping for that because he hasn't. I'm looking at the board now and he hasn't added any sick picks. I catch him off guard every week.
I have one good one.
Okay, all right, he's got one to go.
So
ready to go.
Yeah. The other thing with guests I wanted to touch on is I don't think we have the clout just yet to say this is our rules. If you want to show up, whatever. But we want to be intentional trying to keep that Australian morning time slot, which kind of works with the US and most of the world, except maybe Europe. Instead of doing, maybe like if there's one specific case, we might do like record in the evening and not do it live or even do live. But the idea is to try to, with this podcast, like America has dozens of amazing live podcasts. And I don't know many other Australian duos or singles that do like some tech podcasts. So we want to try to, even if we usually have 0 to 1 or 2 people watching live, but we want to try to create that intentionally APAC friendly time zone production. So if you want to come, I guess the idea was like, it would probably be your evening. Most places you live in the world, unless you live in Australia or actually we have so much overlap with like Philippines, India, Indonesia. Like there's a lot of countries where there's really interesting people, and I kind of am brainwashed from trying to, when I do my workshops or with Epic Web or Pro Tailwind, I cater for San Francisco and LA and West Coast of the United States, but that's not the only two options. It's not our time zone or Pacific time. There's plenty of
Yeah.
other places to
Totally.
go.
And yeah, as you said, like right now with us, I guess we're not in daylight savings, and I guess maybe the US is in daylight savings. Anyway, there's like a nice overlap at the moment of our not too ridiculously early in the morning. It lines up nicely with the not too ridiculous late in the US, and so
Yeah.
give it like 2 months, and that won't be the case. It'll be another like
We'll switch
ridiculous
back.
situation where it's 4 a.m. or something in the States, but
Yeah,
right now
this 2 hour spread, because everyone moves up 1 hour the other way. It makes, even with my family, like the kids try to speak with the grandparents, and sometimes I try to speak with them too. But we try to organize the grandkids and grandchildren for the relationship, and because they know me, I'm not changing anymore. Well, I'm probably but we find a time that works perfectly right after dinner, and then when it becomes the routine, it's just like gets all jacked up because we changed time. And now it's like, oh, let's maybe before breakfast in the morning. It's gonna work. The Europe and Australia's East Coast is probably the most ridiculous 12-hour, not 12, but it's like almost 12. It goes from 10 to 8, and that just kids go to bed quite early, and my parents sleep quite late in the morning because they're retired and they earned it to not have to get up early. So there's the window gets surprisingly difficult very easily.
Yeah. So something else we want to do other than guests is, something I want to do is have like some more kind of fun game style episodes. I used to love, what was that podcast that I used to listen to a lot about JavaScript? What's the JavaScript one?
I don't know.
Something.
Is it 2 people more? There's so many.
Yeah. Front end happy hour was one of them, and then there was another one. Anyway, it was always fun when they had guests on, and then they like just basically did like a fun little trivia session. Or with syntax, there's like Stumped is one of the categories of episodes I used to do. So I think it'd be really fun to
expose ourselves.
expose ourselves and how little we actually know. And do some like interview style questions about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and maybe SQL as well. We'll see. We'll see how either of us will do on SQL.
I'll ask the questions.
But yeah, I think that'd be a fun way to start it and kind of design it with some points and things that don't really matter, but just to have some fun. And then, we could have other styles of it, like, Jeopardy style ones, or just, some fun little game style episodes that we could kind of sprinkle in there occasionally.
This is great. This is a great idea. When you brought that up, my instant like imposter syndrome thing was like, oh, I don't want Java. What if I can't answer the question? And I was like, so what? Like, whatever. I've got skills that other people don't have. I definitely have not skills that people have, but so what? And so I thought, like, it may as well, because typically this stumped question is like JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, whatever. And I thought, because we both create a lot of videos and stuff, we could expand to do some funny questions about like different types of microphone or lighting techniques or editing, or what's a ripple delete, or like whatever, like expand this quiz to more areas than just programming. And then, because as everyone knows, Jon always picks Ryobi tools for his 6-bit. We were joking that maybe we can even expand like some quiz of like some like the lawnmower line from Ryobi, and like some technicalities between the 36-volt versus 18-volt battery mower.
You have no idea how much I'm gonna win in this. Like, you don't you don't want to challenge me on Ryobi tool trivia.
But yeah, I think it's great, and the whole genre. It's a French word, by the way. You say genre in French.
Genre.
The whole genre of game slash quiz slash question answer is really cool and appealing to me. I think it'd be good
Yeah,
fun, and that's you can also combine it with the previous topic, which is having guests and like bring guests and do fun stuff. I like that
totally.
a lot.
And I would love to just like have a chat with guests about, something they're working on or their history or whatever. That would be fun. And it would give us an excuse to bring them back as well if we had like, a quiz happening, or we could like pick two
Yeah,
competing technologies and run a quiz between
pit them against each other,
work out which one is the best dev
and then
tool
just
by
get out
seeing
of
how,
yeah.
how well they do with interview questions.
That's great. I really like this. Another sort of topic idea ahead. And of course now I forgot. For the whole last minute I was in my head thinking of this. All right, if you get something, it'll pop back in my head. But I was thinking
Okay.
of.
And so yes, another. See, I really back on the like game stuff.
Yeah.
Like I love board games, and I always find it's like a fun way to like over the weekend we played so much Uno, like an insane amount of Uno, and not with the kids. Like we waited until the kids went to bed, and
That's
as
even
soon as
better.
the kids were out of the picture, it was glasses of wine and Uno for just hours. Like we stayed up until like 12 o'clock just playing Uno one after another, and it's really nice having those kinds of like simple games where like you're still able to kind of have a conversation, but it gives you something to kind of to concentrate on if there are some lulls in the conversation.
Yep.
Or if
A prompt.
Yeah.
It's great. Uno is amazing. We camp a lot and we definitely play Uno a lot with the kids most of the time. But I like the idea of like go to bed and then we can have a
adults only Uno.
Yeah. It's funny. A random side quest, which is how we end up in hour-long episode. But I saw a tweet from a Taylor Otwell, creator of Laravel, and he was like, what is in your list of like he called it S tier, like the top tier software? And he was like the constraints are like it's super simple, incredibly powerful, and easy and stuff like that. And his list there was Trello, and there was spreadsheets, and it's undeniably both you can do crazy stuff with it, and it's pretty intuitive, and you can learn the basics really quickly and then go deep. And I think in a non-software way, the Uno game is part of this. Like it's super simple, and it creates so many experiences from two people to like I don't know. I've played Uno at New Year's Eve with like families and cousins and like 15 plus people, and we played from 6 p.m. till midnight non-stop, and no one wanted to stop. Like, who cares about the fireworks? We're playing Uno.
Yeah, that was our weekend. It was like anytime there was just like a break, like like a couple of people need to shower and then we're gonna go to the playground or whatever. It was like quick game of Uno. Let's break out the deck. It's like it's so simple. There's no setup. It's great.
I gotta say, I really respect and appreciate the fact that you say Uno, because it's Italian. I'm Swiss and we speak Italian and German and French. So Uno means one in Italian, and that's why when there's one card you say Uno. And my kids say no. And I'm expecting most English speaking people say you want to play Uno, and I'm like Uno, man. You gotta say Uno. And we like they know and they say it sometimes, but they always revert back to the Aussie and it does my head in. I'm sorry if you play call it Uno.
Yeah, Uno, for sure. Did you remember what you were gonna say?
Yes. Now I'm gonna forget again. No, I remember. Far out. It's amazing. Yes, now I remember again that I forgot that I remember.
We're not editing the podcast anymore,
No.
Simon.
No,
you gotta
is live. Ship it live, man. Well, we are live actually. The other topic I would like to do, but this requests us to find a better way to collect more questions, is this like mailbag sort of like send the question. Yeah. We've kind of done that on the website with the suggestion, but it's because our audience is so big, it hasn't really caught off. But maybe a more intentional on Twitter, like say, hey, we're going live tomorrow, like send us a question. We want to do mailbag stuff or AMA or whatever. And it just have a list of questions. So not that we ever stuck for topics, but it's kind of nice to mix it up with like, hey, let's do listeners question episode, and we go through anything from 1 to 6, 10, 20, whatever gets us to the 30 minutes, which, by the way, we are at 29 minutes and 56 seconds right now.
Gotta wrap it up, Simon. I'm afraid I gotta cut you off there and move on to sick picks.
Yeah, but we wanted to talk about the future. We wanted to be a little bit more short and on time, have guests, and have episodes about games and stuff, and AMA, mailbag. So we've covered all of this, and I think it's pretty good format.
So if you head to navbar.tech/suggestions, no, the deployment's disabled. I think our site's down. I'll fix that up before you try and go there. But if you go to navbar.tech/suggestions, you can request an episode that you would like us to cover, or a topic you would like us to cover. Because we would love to cover some things that you folks are interested in hearing about. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking about Ryobi tools.
Yeah. Yes. So this is basically the very crux of like making the NavBar sustainable for us, fun and more mature and capable of bringing people along. And who knows, maybe one day bring sponsors or whatever. Like someone wants to acquire us for $2 billion. Like, I guess to do that, you need to have some sort of structure to it. This is the goal, isn't it? Retire wealthy from a podcast, or
That's
continue doing it, but sustainably. Yes. So, with all that,
do you have a sick pick for me, Simon?
I do.
Oh yes.
I haven't put it. We have this little back channel thing notes, but I'm very off the cup, so I didn't put it. But my sick pick this week is DaVinci Resolve, and specifically the Fusion page in DaVinci Resolve. So if you don't know, DaVinci Resolve is an video editing software, but instead of doing just video editing, it does the whole umbrella of editing videos, but also doing motion graphics like chapter tiles and special effects and explosions and wobbly things. And then audio engineering and color correction, color grading, all that stuff. Typically, if you're in the Adobe world, you have like Adobe Premiere for the editing, and then you export everything to After Effects for the special effects, and export everything to Adobe Audition, or I don't know how it's called, the audio one. Yeah. Or if you're on Apple, you have Final Cut Pro for the editing. And then I think you can do a bit of motion graphics, but if you want to go full on Hollywood movies, you have to go to After Effects, which is Adobe, so you have to pay for the subscription. Anyway, Resolve has that amazing thing, which is the shared state timeline between all these apps. So you edit your video, and then if you want to do some motion graphics, you go to that Fusion page, and they have the same timeline, and you can start making motion graphics, which get embedded in your timeline. And if you want to change the audio, you go to the audio page, and it's still the same timeline. So it's basically having multiple apps that share the same editing cut timeline you're working on.
That workflow is just so good. Like, having to move it into a completely different app is just so time consuming, and then exporting it back out of there and putting it back in. And especially if you're then crossing over, like you were saying, those different brands, like if you're editing in Apple stuff, like moving it across to an Adobe application to do After Effects stuff and then moving it back again to Apple, like it would just, nightmare. And so just being able to click on a tab and you're already there, like your whole project, whatever you're working on, right there, and you can start working on motion graphics. It's
incredible. Like Resolve is a big like learning curve, especially Fusion, but it's so rewarding that everything you do, you will probably never reach the ceiling of what the software can do. Just for context, people in Hollywood studio, like the Marvel movies, are edited with Resolve. Like if you go on the Resolve website, you can see all these crazy Hollywood, like top class, top tier movies editing with Resolve. And so I don't think us little YouTube dev ed content creators will hit that limit. No. But on your point, I've shared a little clip from a video this morning from Casey Ferris, who's a really good YouTube teacher for Resolve stuff, and I learned all my Fusion stuff from. And he's got this example where there's a lady who takes a chicken nugget and opens it, and it's like, oh, imagine you wanted to reinforce that it's steamy hot and you want a bit of steam coming out. And it's like, okay, in After Effects, like in whatever editing, Final Cut or Premiere, you would export the whole project and then import in After Effects and add your little smoke and then re-export that and then re-import in your editing stuff. And then you're like, oh, it's a bit too much. Let's re-export and just do that dance so many times. And he's like, check this out. Click on Fusion tab, create it's called a little, like a fractal noise, whatever, that makes some clouds. And then he makes a mask. So it just scoped to right at the opening of the chicken nugget. And then he goes back to the edit page and there's smoke coming out of the nugget. And it's like he never left the app or the workflow. And it took about 10-15 seconds. And that really drives the point home of why it's a good investment to learn this, even if you already know After Effects. But this is my sick pick because this past week I've started going on a deep dive on Fusion, and I've discovered it is very similar to programming and funny enough to Tailwind CSS philosophy. The way Fusion works, there's a little thing called a node for each single purpose function, exactly like Tailwind utility class where you combine padding and background colors and border and all that stuff. In Fusion, you have a background and a text node and then a merge to merge them together and then a transform to zoom in or rotate them. And instead of just clicking on your text and rotate it, you're like, okay, I need to transform the text. So I will pipe it into a transform node, and the transform node is where you do the rotation. And so you compose all these little nodes together, and it gives this incredible composability that you can do anything you think of with just simple single purpose nodes that you can assemble in like Lego blocks basically. And it's really cool. Then you can export it as a reusable component with props. So I've made that title thing. I know Jon knows because I slacked him the result and I tweeted it yesterday. I've created this cool title and I was like, I imagine people would change the color, the text, whatever it says, and then that's it. And so you expose these as options it's called a macro, but it's kind of like a React component with props, a props API. And then people drag your new fun title component you've created, and all they can do is put the text, choose the color, and then they have the thing completely made. And you can right click and explode it to kind of eject and control all the parts. But it's so cool and it's very programmy like, and I really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, and you can actually do some actual programming in it too. So I've also been playing with this recently. I did for our Super Bases Now GA video, which we put out a couple of months ago. I got right into the motion graphic stuff and doing like animated text things. And one of them was like a counter that counted up to 1 million databases that we're now hosting at Superbase. Yep. And so you can write these like expressions that can basically like loop through a collection of numbers over a specific amount of time. And that's just like the beginning. Like there's this whole, the whole Lua programming language is exposed under the hood. And so you can write any kind of programming stuff you want, which is just so helpful when when you are a software developer or whatever, and your mind thinks like that. How can I write a little logical expression that's going to do this thing for me, rather than, understanding how to do like design and motion graphics things. It's nice being able to access all of it.
Yeah, and it's exposed to every single field. It's something I hadn't realized, but any text field input, if you type equal, it's exactly like in Excel spreadsheets. If you type equals, you enter, you're going to give me a formula or some function. And a quick example I did in my title, I did this stop motion feel like, instead of it being too fluid when the letters come up and bounce and then land in position, I want it to have that kind of like stop motion every 6 frames or so. So it's kind of jittery on purpose. And then I also added some panning rotation. And then I kind of mapped all of this to a time stretcher node. So again, this node is to make like speed warps and stuff. And in the tutorial, again, Casey Farris, which I mentioned before, showed how you can press equal, and then JavaScript developers will understand that. You each frame has a reference called time. So if you just go time, it's gonna be the normal frame. Each frame is its own frame. But you could go floor, like math.floor in JavaScript, so it's gonna bring it back down to the nearest round integer. And so the function was like floor and then time divided by 3.5. And so every 3.5 frames, it would freeze, bring it back down always because it hasn't reached the next one. And then you multiply it by 3.5 again, so it doesn't slow motion. So it goes at the normal speed, but it kind of holds back for 3.5 frames, and then it jumps to the next one. And so you have this effect, and then typically you would expose that as a prop as the jitter speed, and you could have a slider from 0 to whatever. And if you go 0, it's like completely fluid, and if you go 24, it's just 1 frame per second. And then you can, I find amazing that you can just write a little function that you have the time as a variable, and then you can do whatever math function just with the floor. Or like you can have these expressions, which is the Lua. I haven't even looked into it, but if you know Java, like it's a programming language, you can do math and stuff really intuitively. And the fact that you can right click on any field and pass an expression instead of just the values that are offered to you. So you can tie it to another field and say, take this field, follow this SVG path, but then just add like variability. Like it's crazy. You can do anything you want.
They actually have like an API as well for DaVinci Resolve. I started writing like a script that could do a bunch of the kind of the preparing of a project that I do when I create a new project. And so I automated the process of like I click a button and then it like creates a new project with a particular resolution and frame rate. It drags in the media. It creates proxy media so I can edit it really quickly. And I think did the audio transcription as well. It like triggered off a whole bunch of tasks, so I could just like drop a whole bunch of media in a folder and click a button and then just walk away. And when I come back, like, I'm actually ready to start editing this video.
It's cool,
So yeah, it's really cool that they DaVinci Resolve are kind of exposing these ways to write like code in your video editing software. It's nuts.
From the beginning, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it uses Postgres database to store all your. It's definitely a database, but I think it's Postgres, yeah. So it's a bit intimidating when you start. You're like, oh, create your database, and like, I just want to edit a video, but you just have to give it a folder, and then it's going to store all these databases, and then it stores XML, and it's all programmery. It's basically like a really elegant UI control stuff, like Webflow, but for video editing, I guess. It's insane, and I think let us know in the comments and whatever I think we should do a whole episode on Resolve because we both use it, and it's really really amazing piece of software, and we haven't mentioned it's completely free.
It's insane.
It's ridiculous.
It's free. Like, it's nuts. Like, there is a paid version. I think both of us have the paid version now, which gives you access to like a couple of like AI features and stuff. But like everything we were just talking about, like the whole thing is free. Like, it's not like they give you access to like this, very beginner
with a
like
watermark or
and it's not like a timed trial or anything like that. The whole thing is free, but then there are a couple of like really, niche tools that they add on top that are just the things that like cost them money to run. So like, AI transcription of scripts and stuff like that. And there are just like very few small, very, very pro features that you can purchase by buying the software, but you can edit Hollywood level movies with completely the free version. Like, nothing is holding you. It's nuts.
A friend of mine kept recommending it, and I was like, in my head, I was always thinking, it's gonna be like 15,000, like the whole Adobe Premiere Suite if you buy it off the like not the subscription. I was like, I don't have money. I want a free too. And one day he said, dude, I keep telling you it is free. And in my head, I was like, but watermark 3 export in 480.
Or like it's going to be like the iMovie version. And really you need like Final Cut to do anything real.
And I tried the free and I was blown away. If you've seen any of my YouTube videos on the Tailwind Labs channel, and it's all the free Resolve, and I barely scratched this is why we're going to make an episode, and in the episode we will reveal to you how they can make it free, because it's like a really strange business model, but it's a good one.
And this is also why we can't do 30-minute episodes, because Simon is too excited about the things that he wants to sick pick.
And now for John Myers' sick pick.
My sick pick this week is to learn to make sourdough, or like any kind of bread. I just like bread. There's something special about it. It like connects you to, it connects you to the ingredients that you're making. And there's just something about sourdough. Like the process is quite like it's not a super complicated bread, but there are so many steps where you can go wrong just by changing something a tiny little amount.
Yeah.
And so like it is a super simple bread. It's got super simple ingredients, and like the process is like each step is quite simple. But yeah, it just like everything needs to be done in the correct way. And I feel like you learn so many techniques about baking and bread stuff, and like the strength of dough and different flours that you should use and stuff like that. It's a really satisfying thing when you get it right. And so I got really into making sourdough during the COVID lockdown. And so
as many people
we
did,
couldn't go anywhere, couldn't go to any of the nice bakeries that were just outside of our area that we were allowed to go. And so, yeah, I started like learning how to make sourdough, and I got to like a certain level, and I didn't like, it kind of just, the interest fell off eventually. And then I tried to make some after not making some for years, and it just went terribly wrong because I didn't have all of those techniques fresh in my mind, and all those
top
little
of the
bits
mind.
yeah, that compounding care that you give sourdough over time, because it takes like 3 days to make a loaf of sourdough, or really it takes like 3 months to make a loaf of sourdough, because you've got to like develop a sourdough culture. You've got to develop like the bacteria that's like the yeast that that eats the bread and creates that like sour flavor. So it's this like really long process. And so when you get to the end and you actually have like bread that worked out and you did it correctly, and like you understand all the little bits that need to go into it, it's just so satisfying, and it's such a delicious type of bread, and it's so nice to like share with friends, take it to a dinner party or whatever. It's it's amazing. And so I recommend you go and learn how to make sourdough, and go and watch the YouTube videos on it. And even if it seems ridiculous, each of these like little things that they're doing, like, come on, that's not going to make a difference. The sum of all of those little things makes a huge difference, and it's really satisfying.
If you have
and really
all the
like,
dials right, this is
it's really therapeutic to go through this whole process and get to the end where you have this very delicious bread. But then you actually don't eat all of it yourself over and over again, because that's not a good idea to eat that much bread.
Do it for sharing, yes.
That's right. Yeah, that's why I said take it to the dinner party, or like make it for the kids. Like, yeah, share it. It's a sharing bread. It's not an eat an entire loaf yourself bread.
Yeah, I really like what you say about the longer and more care and craft and learning and failure and then getting good at it takes, the more joyful the experience is at the end. Like there's something to be said about like people want to take shortcuts and do stuff they nail on first try. But if you speak to someone like Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics, for 8 years they've been
champion of the NBA final. Yes. We still need to do an episode on basketball to lose all of our listeners.
But before they won, and the same happened with the Golden State Warriors, before they won and Jordan's Bulls, like that 7 or 8 years of failing, getting so close, and then we need a little bit more 3-point shooting, tighten up the defense, and then adjustments. Concessions, there's people that brought them almost there and got traded to bring the last piece that allowed them to win the championship. On that note, I don't want to make it longer, but I love how the coach, the Boston Celtics coach, said, we won with this team today. There's players like Marcus Smart and other people that have left the team literally last year, and they also won the championship in a way, because there's no way we get there without their contributions and helping us figure out what's the last tweak. Do I add a bit more yeast to the temperature for the bread? At what time do I add the beer or whatever you put in there? Like it's really all these things that together bring you to the final result that you can really enjoy and share with everyone.
Yeah, love it. And I will definitely make you some sourdough if you ever come to Melbourne, or if I come up and visit in Sydney.
Not Sydney. 6
No,
hours further.
Sydney-ish, New South Wales, northern New South Wales.
Yeah. Small state.
Yeah.
All right, look at us. 50 minutes. We have done all the things. We can
It's
wrap
the
up.
shortest episode we've done. We were aiming for 30. We got to 50, but we've definitely improved or reduced the amount of time we take for an episode. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you again next week.
See you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Let us know what you feel about the comments, and see you soon. Bye.